26 minutes past the hour, top of the morning to you, final Thursday of the month. We are Miller and Moulton. I'm in Jacksonville for the Jags and the Dolphins tonight. The home team, a 3-point favorite. Mark back in the cozy confines. Pleasure to welcome for the first time. We have been remiss to not have Josh Houtz on our show sooner. He covers the Dolphins for thefinsider.com, thefinsider.com, also host of the Finsider podcast. You can follow Josh on Twitter at Houtz, Houtz. Josh, thanks for getting up this early for us. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about the Dolphins. And how are you guys doing this morning?
We're doing very well, and I'm glad you're excited because, you know, it's tough for Dolph fans, but this is a game that you kind of have to sell on hope. And we literally put our poll question out there, and we did have a bit of teasing from it, but we know that these are the two youngest teams in the league. So no one's expecting anything this year. Jacksonville's gotten off to a little better start, but this is really a litmus test for maybe 2022, 2023. How close in your eyes is this Dolphin team to making the playoffs? Is it 2 years away? Do you think next year's a possibility? What are you trying to figure out with the 2020 Miami Dolphins?
I'm glad you said that because that's really the million-dollar question. And you ask Dolphin fans, you know, they kind of teeter on 1 week, you know, this team's going to the playoffs in 2020. Next time, you know, everyone's preaching patience, and 2021 is the year. So it's hard to say because right now the Miami Dolphins are struggling to find an identity on offense and on defense. I mean, Brian Flores is a defensive-minded head coach. We had hoped that defense would be playing a lot better. So I never thought 2020 was the year the Dolphins would compete, but we know they got Tua Tagovailoa. We know they made all those free agent acquisitions and all those draft picks. So I think 2021 is a more accurate year that the Dolphins should be able to compete in the AFC East and the AFC, but who really knows? I think the Dolphins have been very disappointing early on this season, and they have to turn it around against Jacksonville because starting 0-3, you really can't come back from that.
And 0-3 with Seattle coming to town in 10 days. Josh, listen, the Dolphins got significantly better every month of last season. So I think if you're a fan, you've got confidence in the coaching staff to be able to coach guys up. But so far, early, give me a unit that's playing better than they were a year ago. I mean, that's what has struck me, Josh. You know, I was expecting, even if they started 0-2, I was just expecting certain units to look better than last year. And right now, I'm having trouble finding a unit that I like more this year than the second half of last year.
I think for me, it comes down to the offensive line. I think that was obviously the Dolphins' biggest weakness. And when you bring in a guy like Tua Tagovailoa, you have to fix that offensive line quickly because they were 32nd ranked unit last year. We know the rushing game was led by Ryan Fitzpatrick. He was the Dolphins' leading rusher in 2019. So that's kind of where I see it starting. We know the Dolphins brought in Matt Breida. They brought in Jordan Howard. We see Myles Gaskin making plays, but that offensive line has been a pleasant surprise. Austin Jackson fit right in at left tackle. Solomon Kinley's playing out of his mind at right guard. So definitely improvement on the offensive line and that running game in general. So I think that's where it all started. I think that's been the biggest surprise for the Dolphins this year. And, you know, moving forward, I mean, the older you get, you start to realize trenches is where the games are won and lost. And, you know, the Dolphins on offense, they built the trenches up. Now they got to figure something out on defense because we saw them get gashed in week 1 for 217 yards on the ground. You just can't win football games that way.
Well, and despite the two rookies playing better on the offensive line, the Dolphins are still 27th through a couple of games in rushing. And if you are a team that's not very good on the defensive line, Josh, this is an area that they're going to have to continue to pound because Miami's in a position right now. If they want to try to win games, they're going to have to try to shorten games, aren't they?
Absolutely, and you can't go to New England and let Cam Newton and that rushing attack run for 217 yards. Just like last week, you can't let Josh Allen throw for 400-plus yards and 4 touchdowns. And it all starts up front. If you can't get pressure on the quarterback, which the Dolphins have shown they cannot yet, you know, it's going to be a long day for that secondary. And we saw Byron Jones go down. We saw Noah Igbenogany, the rookie, could not keep up with Stephon Diggs. That's definitely a matchup to keep an eye on. We know DJ Chark's, I believe, questionable for tonight. But, you know, if the Dolphins secondary doesn't do something, if they can't get pressure up front, it's going to be a long day. And, you know, Gardner Minshew's going to do what Minshew's been doing. And that offense looks pretty good early on in the season.
He's Josh Houtz. He covers the Dolphins for SB Nation, thefinsider.com, host of the Finsider Radio podcast. Follow him on Twitter at Houtz. Do you think the matchups are a little better this week, that Buffalo brought a legit number one wide receiver to the party, and that Diggs won a few of the battles against Howard, and that maybe Miami's corners, they've got a lot invested in the cornerback position, 2 high-priced corners and a first-round slot corner. Do you think that that matchup is a little better for Miami against Jacksonville's receivers?
I do, because like you said, you're not looking across from a Stephon Diggs, who, I think we all can admit is at least a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. He had a field day with no Igbenogany. So I do like the Dolphins matchup. Like I said, I think DJ Chark is questionable. I guess that will probably be close to a game time decision, but Laviska Shenault has been out of his mind. They're lining him up all over the place. Chris Conley. So the Jags do have some receivers, but like you said, they're paying all that money. Byron Jones is out, but they still shouldn't, allow a Chris Conley and a Laviska Shenault to go out there and have their do what they want in that secondary, because they spent all that money on Xavier Howard. They invested a first-round pick in Noah Igbenogany. This is a defensive-minded head coach, Josh Boyer, the secondary coach, who's done a great job with the defensive backs. He got promoted defense coordinator this offseason, and that defense has been the biggest weakness for me, in my opinion, and something has to change against Jacksonville, because you can't go out there week after week, not get pressure on the quarterback, and just let the opposing quarterback do what they will with that secondary.
I think we'd be a lot more excited if instead of the mustache versus the beard, it was the mustache versus the kid. You even brought it up in your tweet. Are we going to talk Tua? And I was trying to make a reason to not bring him up at all this year. I don't want him to play this year. But all of a sudden, Tyrod Taylor gets an injection, has a lung collapse, and Justin Herbert goes in and looks fantastic. The guy who a lot of people thought was the most ill-prepared to step into an NFL lineup this year went out and not only played the part, looked the part, and did pretty damn well. That then leads to, oh boy, now the Dolphins going to want to see Tua. First, Josh, when do you want to see Tua? And secondly, when do you think we will see Tua?
Okay, to answer the first question, I've always kind of thought it later in the season around that Cincinnati game against Joe Burrow. I think that would be, the NFL would lose their mind. Joe Burrow versus Tua Tagovailoa. We saw what they did in college. That would be a great matchup. That's kind of where I see him coming in, but I do know the Dolphins have the Jets, then they have a bye, and then they play the Jets again. So the bookend against the Jets, I think that could be when we see Tua Tagovailoa. But you're right. No one expected Justin Herbert to do what he did. And, this is the NFL. We see it every week. You see someone come in, step up, and do things that, we know Justin Herbert was talented, but we didn't expect him to come in, I think it was a second's notice and go out there and play the way he did. They almost beat the Kansas City Chiefs. It wasn't his fault they lost, but Dolphin fans, they need to temper their expectations, because I think the benefit of having a Ryan Fitzpatrick, a guy that understands Chan Gailey's offense, a guy who's been around the league for 16-plus years, I think what that's going to teach Tua, as far as the mental aspect of the game, going out there, reading defenses, understanding the game, and letting everything slow down. I think that's in his best interest. And then, once Ryan Fitzpatrick proves that he's Fitztragic, which we know is eventually going to come, I think at that point they'll pull the trigger. It'll be Tua Tagovailoa, and, at that point they really can't turn back. So Dolphin fans need to temper their expectations, but I do think Tua will start this year. And when he does, hopefully that's the guy we've been wanting for the last 20 years.
Home for Seattle, at San Francisco. If they don't get a win tonight, they could be staring at an 0-5 start. And I just throw this out there from a schedule standpoint. Week 7, Justin Herbert and the Chargers come to South Florida. You wonder if the Dolphins, from an organizational standpoint, if they have a bad record, could keep Tua on the bench while the guy they passed over and got taken right after him comes to town with the Chargers. Just kind of throwing that out there. And with that in mind, Josh, do you think the Dolphins are making the decision at quarterback based on the quarterbacks or based on the play around the quarterbacks? Like, I wouldn't play Tua until I was convinced that my revamped offensive line could protect him. So far, so good. Do you think that the line play helps get him in the lineup sooner than later?
That's a great point. And I think that's kind of what fans and just anyone that's trying to figure out why Tua Tagovailoa might not be starting, they got to take a step back, because like you said, it's a revamped offensive line. We saw how, you don't want to say he's injury prone, but he got hurt in college pretty often behind a pretty good offensive line at Alabama. So you definitely want to see the offensive line click and prove that this isn't just, the first 3 weeks of the season and it's not a fluke. You want to get that run game established. But like I said earlier, the Dolphins have Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I think that's the biggest difference between them and, the Chargers, I get Tyrod Taylor's a pretty good veteran quarterback, but I still think Ryan Fitzpatrick, we see him going out there and making some of those throws that just wow you still. So his understanding of Shane Gailey's offense, the unprecedented offseason, I think you keep all that in mind, and I think that's why Ryan Fitzpatrick did get the start. But, I mean, from a talent perspective, I think a lot of people think Tua Tagovailoa, this guy could have been the number 1 overall pick if he never got hurt. So I definitely think they need to wait and see and let everything develop around them. I mean, Devontae Parker's in and out of the lineup. There's different pieces that need to all just be healthy, come together, have everybody clicking, and at that point, Tua Tagovailoa can just go in there. It'd be a fluid transition, and from there, like I said, hopefully everything Dolphin fans wanted for the last 20 years.
Josh brings 2 things to the show that I don't know if we've ever had before. Better hair than David Moulton, and it's not close.
Whoa!
Not close. You're looking at the picture now. I mean, that is fantastic. I'm incredibly jealous, and this is the part that may just get my co-host to tune out. Last night, as I was getting ready for the show and kind of checking out on Josh, he was playing a virtual Madden game of the Dolphins versus Jacksonville to see how tonight would turn out. Now, I did not see the final. I know it was 16-7 Fins at the half. My question to you, are you letting the computer play, or because you say you are an all-pro diaper changer, are you letting the child play against you as you're the Dolphins?
Man, that's a lot to take in. Thanks for the compliment about the hair, but I did let the computer play, and in typical Dolphins fashion, I think you said you saw it was 16-7. They ended up losing. I forget what the score was, but it was just typical Dolphins fashion. They fell apart. So I'm letting the computer play. My girls are not quite old enough to play Madden, but once they are old enough to get the stick in their hand, they'll definitely be playing.
I like your style. I have a college-age son who is dying for me to get a PlayStation, and I keep saying my daughter's only 6. I don't know if I can pull it off with the wife yet to get it. So I love where you're at with that, Josh. No doubt about it. When you look at Miami tonight, and you've talked about their offense, but who needs to step up offensively? We all know what Fitzmagic can and can't do, but they have really struggled. You said they need to run the ball and be effective, but is it getting more to Williams? Is it getting more to Parker, who's been banged up? Offensively, who do they need to step up to start scoring some points and not put so much pressure on that defense, Josh?
I think that's where it starts with the 2 receivers. And you mentioned Devontae Parker, and we know he's, in and out of lineups. The guy is, when he's on the field, he's a true number 1 wide receiver. You can see the dominance at times, but it just needs to stay healthy. And Preston Williams, we all saw that, crucial drop in the end zone on 4th down. So both those guys need to step up because, I mean, if it's magic, they put up 28 points against the Bills. And when you score 28 points against the Bills, I mean, you kind of expect to win that game, especially when you have a defensive-minded head coach, and they just couldn't do it. So I think the receivers have to step up because I like what the running game's doing. You like how Fitzmagic's playing. And, if he doesn't have Devontae Parker out there, if he doesn't have Preston Williams, all he has is to rely on really is Mike Gesicki. And we saw him. Gesicki had a huge game last week, but it wasn't enough. Need to see Preston Williams make that catch at the goal line. Dolphins probably win that game if he makes that grab. So Parker, Williams, they need to step up, and they need to step up in a big way.
Josh, is there a pass rush on this roster without sending multiple guys? When I look at them, I feel as if they've tried to spend the last year and a half fortifying the run defense, which arguably is still not fortified enough. But it just seems to me as if at some point they're going to have to go out and buy a pass rush. If they can't draft it, they're going to have to buy it. I just – if they get a team to 3rd and 6, they can't get to the quarterback, in my opinion, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on those high-priced corners and on those inexperienced safeties because I just don't think they can get to quarterbacks.
I mean, spot on. That's kind of the feeling around the Miami Dolphins, and it has been ever since Cameron Wake left. I mean, he was the guy that when you needed pressure, he somehow always got to the quarterback. I mean, that guy was a monster. Dolphins don't have a player like Cam Wake. We know they could have signed up to Davian Clowney. They could have traded for Yannick. They had all these different, options out there where they could have got that game-changing pass rusher, like you mentioned. They don't have one on the roster. I like what Emmanuel Ogbah does. I like what Shaq Lawson does. But they're true edge setters. And let's be honest, they didn't really do a good job of setting the edge week 1. A little better job in week 2. But if they can't get to the pass rusher, like you said, without dialing up, blitzes or bringing pressure from other places, if you can't get to the quarterback, they're just going to sit back there in the pocket and pick you apart. That's what we've seen the first 2 weeks of the season.
Either team tonight, give us, in your estimation, best fantasy play for the night. And it could be either way.
Best fantasy play. I'm going to go with Mike Gesicki. We saw him have that big game. If DJ Chark plays, I think that's kind of where I'd lean. And maybe in Laviska Shenault, because, again, I think his versatility, I think his speed's going to give the Dolphins problems. And quite honestly, I liked him a lot in the pre-draft. But I'm going to go with Mike Gesicki. Guy called 8 of 11 targets last week, 130 yards. He's playing in the slot, I think 92% of the snaps. So he's a glorified slot wide receiver. When you put a 6'6" tight end in the slot, I mean, who's going to cover him? A small nickel corner, a linebacker? I mean, that's a mismatch waiting to happen. So I think if Preston Williams and Devontae Parker can step up, that's going to open things up inside for Mike Gesicki. And if they don't, I mean, they're really going to have no other choice but to feed Gesicki. So after that big week last week, I'm going to say Mike Gesicki's the fantasy play.
Josh, we really appreciate this. Thanks for making time for us, particularly at this hour. All the best with the family, safe travels, and hopefully we can do this again.
You too. It was awesome waking up and talking football with you guys, and hopefully the Dolphins, can turn the season around 1-2 and string together some victories, because I do think good things are bound to happen. Thanks again for having me, guys.
Josh Houtz, he covers the Dolphins for SB Nation's TheFinsider.com. TheFinsider.com. He also hosts the Finsider podcast. Follow him on Twitter at Houtz, which is Houtz. Houtz.
Never in the history of the show have we had that good of hair on the show. Ever.
Hops in our Twitch chat room said, hey, quit criticizing Willie Nelson's grandson. All right.
I mean, the damage he and I could do in Denver is unbelievable. That's my new best friend right there. I like Josh a lot. If you're ever out, I'm looking for Josh to guest host. I don't even know him. I don't know what he'd take, but that's my new guest host. And he's coming on. I'm begging him. When I send the thank you text, he has got to come on video next time.
Johnny Mac, I was thinking he looks like he walked off the set of Pineapple Express. All right. Well played. He's got flow. All right. He's got flow. There's no question about it.
Not many people can make a headband look good. He does. You know what that's got a little of? Like a Vitas Gerulaitis 70s tennis look to it.
Look at you going all Vitas Gerulaitis in the late 70s.
That's what the look is. It's a late 70s tennis look is what he's got right there. It's tremendous.
Yep.
I'm so jealous. I want everybody to understand, I'm not making fun here. This is flat out jealousy. I would have killed for hair like that. I'd never cut it. Ever.
He's young. You still have no idea what's going to happen, though.
It doesn't matter.
No, but right now,
go bald. He's got the shot. He's got the picture. Yeah, sure. David Lee Roth went bald, but the hair was still great. That's awesome.
And like David Lee Roth, Josh has charisma.